Thank you for tuning into today's episode, everybody. So we are very excited to introduce you to today's guest, Sebastian Bates, who is the founder and CEO of the global multiple award-winning martial arts organisation, the Warrior Academy, which is the largest academy in the UAE. And it specialises in character development. And we're going to be diving into what character development is all about in today's episode. And not only that, in 2022, Sebastian founded the Bates Foundation, which is the global charity responsible for sponsoring and mentoring thousands of orphans and underprivileged children in developing countries, whilst providing inspiration and employment to locals. We are thrilled to be joined by Sebastian at this year's Become a Force for Good event, where he's going to be speaking about how to live a limitless life with impact. It's going to be on October the 27th and 28th. It's all about living authentically, living abundantly, and living consciously. And Sebastian is a shining example of this. So enjoy today's episode. Hey everyone, this is Sebastian. Thank you for joining us today, Sebastian.
Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
It's so good to have you here, especially because obviously you're going to be speaking at the event coming up that we've just mentioned in your intro there. And it's just really, really great to touch base and get our audience to get to know you a little bit more in the lead up to that event, because I'm so excited to hear you speak. I obviously have got the inside info on your journey, because obviously I've been following it for a while, but obviously our audience haven't. So you've got such I think a unique story in where you've been and to now what you're doing and the impact you're having on in the world. So I'd love for you to perhaps just introduce yourself for us, like in your own words.
Yeah, sure. So my name is Sebastian Bates. I'm the founder of the Warrior Academy. The Warrior Academy is a martial arts organization that specializes in character development. So I essentially work with parents around the world, transforming their children's lives by developing their character. We started in the UK about 12 years ago in just villages in Somerset and Wiltshire, and expanded quite quickly across the world. We're now in 3 continents. We've been responsible for training over 25,000 children, including the royal family in the UAE and Jordan. And now we're the largest martial arts academy in the UAE. We've got quite an ambitious goal to expand across 8 cities in the Gulf over the next 2 to 3 years. And alongside everything I've been doing with the kind of commercial side of developing the business, I've also been developing a charity called the Bates Foundation. So I'm the founder of the charity called the Bates Foundation, which has basically got a 100-year business plan. It's designed to outlive us. And right now, we started it 6 months ago, and now 50% of our members in the Warrior Academy are orphans, they're homeless, or they are street kids in developing countries. So we teach roughly 4,000 children a week through our program, and half of them are in the Bates Foundation as well. So that's a lot of what I do. Alongside that, I'm also a business mentor. So I mentor around 300 or 400 business owners every year through workshops, courses, mentoring, that sort of stuff. And I've written a couple of best-selling books as well. So that's kind of me in a nutshell.
So that is a very busy nutshell. Like, you're a man clearly of many talents and up to so much good. And our listeners will be listening to that thinking, whoa, that's impressive stuff. What is it though that got you really hooked on like character development? Because a lot of people that are listening to this often find themselves like in kind of stressful situations, whether that be within their own business or whether that be in their family home or even in a work environment, even if that's working for somebody else. And sometimes we want to do these big things, right? People want to have the same kind of impact that you're making and be able to say the beautiful things that you've just said there about like how many kids that you're helping in different parts of the world. And how did you get there though? Because it obviously didn't start like that.
Yeah, so character development it's one of those things that it's the most important yet often missing aspect of a child's education. And if you look at the educational system, you look at the focus on academics, it's often greater than the focus on soft skills. And these soft skills are so often missing, but they're the most important thing that we can teach children, because they literally guide every decision a child makes, from the work they seek, the jobs they seek, the passions they create, the relationships they build, the friendships they invest in, how they see themselves, how they see the world, the risks they take, how they approach challenges, fear, how they overcome adversity. So for me, it's one of the most important, if not the most important things that we can pass on through education and development. I honestly believe that we don't need better educated leaders. We need leaders with better characters. We need leaders with a strong moral compass, strong values, and what I call a black belt character. And I think that if we can transform young people into leaders with a black belt character, we've got an amazing shot at transforming the world. And so that's what I'm on a mission to do. How it all started for me, character development it's been something that's been a massive part of my life as a young person growing up. My parents were, hardworking, government jobs. We lived in a little house in Aldershot, a couple of hours away from London. And I was sort of failing academically in my school, but the school I was in was a very busy state school. There was about 40 kids in the class. I was having a great time socially, but not a great time academically. And but I had an amazing upbringing. I was watching my dad jump out of planes every week. He was in the airborne as a para. We would go on adventures together all the time. He would often leave for 6 months at a time. But when he was back, he was really back, and he was a massive driving force for adventure in my life. And I think that's sort of planted the seed for me in terms of, doing things that are uncomfortable in order to grow as a person. So if I had to trace back where the concept of character development came from for me, it would probably be my childhood there. But there are certain things that happened to me on the way, which have given me a real, realization of what it is I need to do from a purpose perspective. What is my purpose, and what is why character development is so important, because like you say, you don't just go from A to B. There's a lot of bumps on the road, and to really understand that, I would need to take you back to 2014, where I was a professional wingsuit base jumper. I'd done about 500 wingsuit base jumps and skydives around the world. I had a really close call. I basically had a base jumping accident. It was my 7th jump of the day in Switzerland. My canopy opened up fine, but it then quickly collapsed, and I dropped 50 foot to my death. I shouldn't have survived that jump at all. My head hit the ground so hard, I bounced straight back up. I broke both legs, both feet, both ankles. It took 3 hours because I was so remote. It took 3 hours to be able to be in hospital on morphine. And the Swiss surgeons and the British surgeons all said I'd never walk again. And so I had, 2 years of rehabilitation. One of the hardest things about that rehab was the nerve damage in my feet. I almost lost both feet. It took me almost a year to feel them again. They died somewhere in Switzerland, basically, and the nerve damage, I almost lost them. So the repairing those feet through rehab was a real mind bender, because I really had to convince myself that the doctors were wrong and that these body parts which don't work anymore could come back to life. And so it was this realization I had of, why am I focusing so much on doing this when everyone's saying it's impossible, when I could have made life easier for me? And some days I'd be really motivated and focused, and the daily habit routine I built in terms of rehabilitation, when I couldn't move at all and I was lying on my back for months, that daily habit routine I built would be very easy for me. I'd wake up excited to do it. And I realized I was motivated at that point. And then other times I wouldn't have that motivation, but I would still do the same routine every single day, regardless of that motivation. And so what I realized is motivation comes and goes, but discipline stays with you. And discipline is linked to character. And character is formed over many, many years throughout your life. And so ultimately, while I was going through this, the physical side of what I was going through, I was also going through the mental side. 15 of my closest friends died during those 2 years base jumping as well. So I had a lot of survivor's guilt going on, as well as the trauma physically that I was trying to, get through. And I think in that moment, there was this realization of, it's not a case of if I'm going to recover, it's when. And it was like a decision I just made, which for me was because I looked back and I realized when I joined up the dots, that level of discipline you need to get through it comes from somewhere. And so I had lots of time for kind of introspective work to look on myself. Why was I in this position? Where did that discipline come from? And ultimately it came from character development. And when I look back, I realized that character development was cemented through martial arts for me. I realized the power martial arts had in developing that discipline which helped me through some traumatic experiences in my life, and ultimately changed the course and direction of my life. And I remember lying there, and at the time I had 200 or 300 students in villages training with me, and I taught. As I recovered, I taught for 1.5 years on crutches, and I remember lying there and sort of saying to myself, when I recover, I'm going to get this message of character development out there. I'm going to have more people aware of how important this is. I'm going to help more kids. I'm going to be less selfish in the risks I take, and not, rather than live a bigger life for myself and take crazy risks with my own body, I'm going to live a bigger life for someone else, for other people, and take crazy risks for other people. And so this purpose, this decision I made on that bed kind of gave me the energy to defy the doctors. That decision gave me the resilience and power to get through that rehabilitation over 2 to 3 years, make a full recovery, and then expand the Warrior Academy literally within 3 years after that accident, when I could walk again, from villages in the countryside to being across 3 continents and teaching 25,000 kids around the world instead of 200 to 300. So it was, when you talk about purpose, it wasn't that the trauma that I went through then gave me the purpose. It was like the trauma I went through shone a light on what my purpose was already, and just said, you need to double down on this and stop thinking about yourself. And so that is exactly where that all came from.
I've got goosebumps listening to that. Honestly, like, it's so powerful. It's motivating. It's clearly inspiring as well. But it's to come back from a place like that when everybody else is telling you what's not possible. Like, there's some real character there, right? Like you've said. So what are the ingredients of like character development? I know it sounds like you've mentioned quite a few there in terms of like discipline and resilience. Is there anything that you could share with our listeners that perhaps are struggling with that discipline whilst they're going through some stressful times?
Yeah, definitely. So the first thing when it comes to character development is it's this big gray area. If I said to a parent, what is character development? Most of them wouldn't be able to give me a straight answer. If I asked 10 parents, they would all give me different answers, right? Some of them would talk about confidence, some of them would talk about soft skills, but there would be no clear, this is character development. So the first thing I realized is that I had to have I had to be able to explain character development very, very clearly in a short amount of time, so parents got it straight away and it was easy to understand and relate to. And, it's such a gray area that it creates this confusion, and confusion equals inaction. If we're confused about something, we simply don't implement, and we can't have any sort of structured plan around it. So what I realized was, if I, can simplify character development, then I can get people to actually implement the steps they need to develop their children's character. And so that's exactly what I did. We did surveys out to around 2,000 parents. We got an enormous amount of data back and then studied that data. And what we found out was there are 3 main things that determine a child's character. And we call them the 3 C's in the Warrior Academy. And that's confidence, conduct, and concentration. Typically, a child has 1 or 2, but rarely all 3 to a high level. So a good example of that is a child may have low confidence, but they may have high conduct and high concentration. So low confidence, they're afraid of putting their hand up in class. They don't particularly like social groups. They don't like being uncomfortable, trying new things, but they're good at concentrating in class. Their focus is good. They get good grades and their behavior is really good. That's a really typical example. So for us, we analyze those 3 C's. We look at the lowest C. In that example, it's confidence. That would be their breakthrough area. We raise that up initially in the first 3 months to try and get as close to the others as possible. And our ultimate goal then is to bring all 3 C's up to a high level to develop what we call a black belt character. A child with a black belt character, more likely to go on to live a happy, successful, and compelling life as an adult. So that is essentially how we describe character and how we analyze it and how we can make it relatable for parents and easy to implement.
And it's so interesting because as you're speaking there, it's not just children, right, that those 3 C's are so important for, right? I think for most adults that's a struggle sometimes, and I think it's really important to be able to recognize which one of those 3 areas is a need, really. If somebody was listening to this, I'm just going to maybe pick on one of the C's. Let's pick on confidence because you use that in your example. if somebody that's listening to this is struggling with confidence, and that is then really holding them back from getting more out of their own life and living that compelling life that they want to, what do you teach the kids when it comes to confidence? Like, how do you do that? Because for sure it's going to translate for us adults as well.
So confidence is one of the big ones, right? And if really confidence it influences so much in our life, from the way we see ourselves to the way we see the world, and all those decisions that I talked about that we make. When it comes to how we transform a child's confidence, a lot of it is implementing what we call the warrior method. So the warrior method is a 4-step character development methodology, which I read a book about called The Warrior Method, which became a bestseller. And the warrior method guides parents and children through these 4 steps: community, inspire, challenge, and lead. And so what we do is we guide them along these steps. The first step, of course, is community. So there's no point in trying to improve a child's confidence until they're part of a safe and supportive community. If you really want to improve a child, you know they've got to take risks and challenge themselves, right? They've got to be uncomfortable at some point, but they can't do that unless they're part of this safe, supportive community where they feel respected and trusted. So that's the first thing we do. We ultimately make sure they have this feeling of belonging, and that's what we created with the Warrior Family. So that's the first step, making sure that you're part of a community. And one of the things we often say is, environment dictates performance. When you're in that community that looks after each other, that's shared, that's got the same values and stuff, the other steps are so much easier. The next thing is inspire. So when it comes to inspiration, I mentioned that motivation comes and goes. But one of the things I haven't mentioned is that we're always being coached. Whether we've got a coach or a mentor or not, we're always being coached by ourselves. And that's down to our inner voice. And we're always self-coaching. So one of the things we do in the Warrior Academy is we listen very carefully to how parents speak to their children, how the children speak to themselves about their own performance. And then we correct the language that they use so that they have a positive inner voice. So actually, when we're not there, they're still being coached in the Warrior Academy way by someone in their head. And so often, if you look at chronic bullying, for instance, it starts off as one single event, or a few single events as a young person, or even in the house or whatever it is. But as they get older, their mind keeps that level of mentoring and continues to mentor them or self-bully. And so the inspiration stage is more about language than anything else. It's about thinking about the way in which you speak to a child, because ultimately when you speak to a child, you paint a picture of what they'll become. And those words you use are so powerful. There's also a huge element of having role models. It's really important that there are role models for your children to look up to, role models that are aspirational. So what's great about martial arts is that we've got this aspirational 8-year journey we call the black belt journey, and there's loads of little steps on the way. If I said to you, okay, you've got 8 years to become a black belt, that's your first goal. After that, we'll talk about the next one. You would suddenly be a bit sort of disheartened. But if I said, okay, this week, you're going to learn this combination, or today, all you're going to do today is meditate for 1 minute, do 10 press-ups, and think about one thing you're grateful for, right? There's your daily habit routine. Your one goal this week is then learning a combination. After a month, it's meditating for 5 minutes. It's 3 or 4 combinations, some self-defense, and maybe even teaching a class of leadership skills. After 3 months, you're earning your next belt. After half a year, you're in your first competition. Within 2 years, you're teaching your first class, and so on and so on. So it's the inspiration side comes down from breaking those goals down. Challenge then becomes really important. Most people approach challenging wrong, even with themselves. When you look at the comfort zone, if you imagine 3 circles in a comfort zone, a lot of people stay in the comfort zone. That's wrong. You don't grow if you stay in a comfort zone. A lot of people then go out of the comfort zone and they move into the middle circle, which is called the high performance zone. Super useful. In the high performance zone, you're outside of your comfort zone. You're pushing yourself more than you're normally used to, but you're able to do the task just about. You push even further into the 3rd circle and you're in the hyper-anxiety stage, or the anxiety zone. From there, this whole thing becomes a negative experience. You don't want to repeat it and you shrink back up into that middle circle. So really, a good mentor knows what your comfort zone is, helps you escape the comfort zone into the high performance zone without you going into the hyper-anxiety stage and stopping you from retracting back into that comfort zone. So challenge is about giving it's about inspiring people to take small challenges that push them out of their comfort zone, but in a very strategic way, repetitively. So it actually becomes normal in doing that. And finally, leadership we teach. So leadership reinforces everything a child learns. So from a practical application, they actually learn the material better, but it's the best tool known to man for developing emotional intelligence. And emotional intelligence, again, soft skills, it's one of the most important things that, you know, determines a child's success in life. I think there was a study recently which said 60% of you know, success in the workplace is down to emotional intelligence, right? Those who have done particularly well in their jobs or their businesses, you know, even if you're an entrepreneur and you're managing a team, how important is it that you've got high levels of emotional intelligence so you can understand what's going on? And, you know, so community inspired challenge leaders is ultimately how we develop each of the 3 C's, and we do it in a slightly different way for each one. And then there's a million different practical things that we do, but hopefully that gives you a good insight when it comes to confidence.
Yeah, it really does. There's so many practical, tactical things actually that anybody listening could implement for themselves or for their kids as well. And I think that's really, really powerful. And it's funny because people hear things like Warrior Academy, and my mind initially jumped to like a classic dojo punching and kicking, and that's not what it's about, right? And my husband Jonathan, who's unfortunately not here with us today, he actually in the very beginning of his career had a business that he went into with another partner in Kent in the UK, which was starting to develop that. It didn't end up going in that direction because Jonathan then went off and joined the Marines, but the principle was there about the true martial arts. And I think it's so easy to get swept away into the commercial things, like parents looking for things for their kids to do and then not thinking about maybe their child's entire life. They're thinking about what can they do to entertain them now, what can they do that is going to help them to build their strengths, but they're more thinking about it from what's the coolest thing rather than really going into the depth. So I really, really love that you've gone into the depth of why these kids need to go through this and all the added benefits. I think it's so powerful, and your purpose is obviously closely linked to that, right?
Do you know what? It's funny, isn't it? Because so many parents want their kids to have a black belt, and for me, the black belt is the moonshot. It's like when you know when I don't know if you heard the JF Kennedy speech about going to the moon. He talks about going to the moon, and he's inspiring the whole nation of why this is an important thing to do for the country. And the whole point of going to the moon wasn't even to reach the moon. If he can convince the whole country that it's a great idea, you know, it's not actually about getting there. It was about how everyone in the country and all the individuals then start to change who they are in order to become the sort of people who could reach the moon, right? It collects the best of us in order to do that. It brings out the best of us. So when you put a child on an 8-year journey to become a black belt, it doesn't even matter if they don't get the black belt. Over those 2 or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, or even if they make it 8 years with us, they transform and their character transforms. And for the child, they need that tangible, physical, that's a black belt, I want that. But for the parent, the moonshot is a black belt character. And it's exactly that, right? A black belt character is an identity. It's something they become. A black belt is just a physical bit of material. Yeah. The black belt doesn't matter. And I know lots of martial artists who have earned a black belt, but it's not in their character. It hasn't transferred into their character. And so for me, I realized that, you know, it's not about earning a black belt. It's not even about martial arts. It's about character development. Why do I use martial arts? Because it's so unique, right? There's a moral code built into every style, as you were talking about, right? If you go back to each of the individual styles, there's a moral code built into everything we do. There is aspirational role models. There's a unique instructor-student relationship. It's holistic in its nature. Mind, body, and spirit all gets developed. And there's goal setting built in from a young age, right? There's a structured approach, you know, weekly, monthly, termly, yearly, with the tangible, visible belt system. There's leadership aspects in place. There's a million different things that make martial arts so unique when it comes to transforming character. But not every martial arts club transforms character. That's the reality, right? I mean, I've gone to many clubs where there's a lot of ego. It's not about that. So for me, I've really come to the realization that we're not about martial arts. If you go to any of our academies around the world, you'll see, you know, it says Warrior Academy, and then it says Character Development Center. It doesn't say Warrior Academy Martial Arts Center.
Yeah.
We're not about martial arts, we're about character. We just use martial arts as a vehicle to develop character because it's probably one of the best tools on the planet to do that.
So like the ultimate transformation, isn't it, for kids? And I love the way you think about it as well, because you're thinking bigger. That big life that you want to live for others is clearly playing out. One of the things I really loved about your story and what you're doing in Warrior Academy is that not only is there this 8-year journey, if they complete that and get their black belt character, are they not then guaranteed a internship or a job with you?
Yeah, and this is, I got a real kick out of this as well, because when I first started the Warrior Academy, people would I first started teaching martial arts in the UK, and this is more sort of as from an entrepreneur's perspective. When you follow your passions, right? People would say to me, "What do you do?" And I would say, "Well, I teach martial arts." Okay, what else do you do? Like you must do something else for a living, right? And you can't possibly do something that fun full time and earn a full-time salary. Anyway, it turns out you can, and that's what I did. And now I get a real kick out of transforming this into a career for people. And not only that, but our students. So it takes about 6 to 8 years to earn a black belt with us. Typically 8 years when they get to 60 and earn their first Dan. At that point, we say we guarantee you a job with us. They pass a 1-year assistant instructor's course. And from that, we've now got about 30 teenagers in the UK who work with us as assistant instructors, who are paid an hourly rate to do that. From that, we then say, right, once you reach 18, we now offer gap years around the world, so that these students, we've got one now and one starting soon. They travel to Dubai from the UK. They teach, hundreds of students in Dubai, including the royal family. Then they'll go to Kenya and teach kids in orphanages. Then they'll go to Nepal and teach students there in the villages and in the countryside. And they go around the whole world using martial arts and the skills they've learned in martial arts to impact lives and earn money while they're doing it. And so for me, that's incredible. I get a real kick out of creating that for people. It's when we sat down and designed it as instructors, we basically tried to create the ultimate gap year. What would we want when we were growing up as the perfect gap year, right? Well, we want to travel, we want to do something we love, we want to have a job with lots of other people who are like us, and we want to earn some money. There you go, boom. We cracked it all.
I love that so much. I love it so much. But I love how that's now evolved into those kids that must have been how old when they started with you?
4. We've got one student who joined us 12 years ago, and now he's a full-time instructor in Dubai.
Oh, that's amazing. That is awesome. Imagine, like, just from your perspective, seeing him go through that as well. Beautiful.
Do you know what's really cool about that? We're now starting clubs in orphanages around the world, right? And as we do that, we've got all these students who they have that magical moment where they put on the uniform for the first time. They wear the Warrior Academy uniform and their identity changes, right? I've spoken a lot about identity. Their identity changes and they're now on a new journey, the black belt journey. And the main difference between a child in an orphanage in Kenya or in a homeless shelter, and some of the homeless shelters we teach in, compared to one of the children in England or Dubai who've got parents, even if you remove the whole factor of parents and money and the education side of things, the biggest difference or the biggest differentiator in their two lives is that one student has got someone who believes in them and sees a future for them, and the other student doesn't. And so when we give them that journey and that identity, they suddenly change the way they think about themselves and their life, and they leave survivor's mode and they start to go into, I want to become this mode. We give them a moonshot to focus them and focus their life for the next 8 years. And what's really cool about that is we're doing that not just with 1 or 2 orphans or homeless children. We've got thousands like that right now who started in the last few months with us. And within 8 years, our goal is to get as many of them employed as possible around the world teaching martial arts. So a lot of these students, 10 years down the line, we would have found a 6-7-year-old orphan, living on the streets of Kenya in Nairobi or whatever. 10, 15 years later, they are a martial arts instructor with teaching hundreds of children with the Warrior Academy around the world. That for us is building that lifelong legacy that outlives us, essentially.
Yeah. And that's obviously the work that you're doing with Bates Foundation, right, as well. So And
Yeah.
I know you said to me before, it's like you've enrolled your dad on this journey with you as well, and he's a big
Yeah.
part of it. And I just love that as well, because it just is. I don't know whether that was always the plan in the beginning to make it a family foundation and that family legacy. But again, I just think it's a beautiful example of from where you were, going back to you, like not being able to walk, being told you where we had to walk, to now creating everything you've already shared with us today. And now you've got that legacy that you're doing with your loved ones as well. And it's so powerful. So tell us a bit more about Bates Foundation, and like how did that actually come about? Because you've clearly been smashing it, making changes with Warrior Academy across different places, heavily in Dubai now as well as the UK. You could have stopped there. So why is it so important to you to continue that ripple effect?
So I built several businesses to sort of seven figures, commercially successful with different business ventures and things that I've done. And, I love that side of business. I really enjoy that. But I actually get a bigger kick out of the sort of philanthropic work we've done. We've done so many different things, from giving over 100,000 days of life-saving clean water to families in Ethiopia, to donating thousands of bikes to children in Cambodia. And then I started doing things, that was through the great work with B1G1. And then I started doing things through personal, just one-off events. I noticed that half my team in the Philippines their family was stranded in a province of Rizal during the flooding and the tsunamis there. So within 24 hours, we managed to gather, 25,000 meals and get them into all these remote parts over there. I got a bigger buzz out of that than I did from a lot of the kind of commercial stuff and success we've had. And so I realized I wanted to double down on this. And I realized that actually, as a business owner, it's not just about making money, and the commercial success is only a part of the fulfillment you can actually get from your business. I started to realize that I wanted to build a legacy alongside the business that we're running. I already knew the impact the Warrior Academy could make to young lives. I wanted to take that to a bigger audience, and to help more students. We were already starting to do local scholarships in the UK. So in the UK, we were partnering with welfare officers, children's hospices, to all sorts of stuff like that, to basically sponsor free tuition and mentoring children who either couldn't afford it or were going through something incredibly difficult and needed our support. And so we were doing that with dozens of children around the UK, which was really, really powerful. And the stories from that were incredible. Mentoring some children who were going through depression and suicidal to come out the other side and live a brighter life was so powerful for us. And that lit a fire in the whole team. The whole team was so inspired to do that sort of work. So it came to my realization that actually, if we want to expand the Warrior Academy around the world, yes, we could expand commercially. We could get investors on board, and we could expand, in all these amazing centers around the world from a business perspective, which we still plan on doing. Our focus is in the Middle East for that. But when it comes to expanding internationally very, very quickly, one of the best ways we can do that is through a charity. And so I wanted to do that, but I realized it's very, very difficult to spread my time between the commercial side and the charity side and do everything. So I have to build a team to do that. My dad was a colonel in the army, amazing guy, full of character, and para, marine, all that sort of stuff. Got me hooked on challenge and adventure, but he was also massive on charity throughout his life. He was always involved with all the small charity events. And then when he finally left the army, he was the regional director of the UK's largest army charity. He wanted a change in his job. He wanted to feel more fulfilled. And I think he wanted more independence with his work. And he wanted a change. So I saw that as a great opportunity to approach him and say, look, why don't you just join me instead? So I basically headhunted my own dad to be the COO of the Bates Foundation. And the way I had to pitch to him, right, to sort of to win this position with him. And I sat down and I said, you've already got all the experience running a charity. I've got all the experience managing an organization internationally through martial arts. We've got a system and a process and methodology in place, which we know impacts lives. Why don't we build, a business that outlives us? Why don't we build a legacy that carries on for generations, that isn't even about us. It's just about, making a huge impact in the world and doing something incredibly worthy. And so that's exactly what we did. He left his job, started with me. Initially, it's a case of, it's self-funded from me. I just pay all the costs and everything. And even now, as we go forward, I pay any sort of costs from the UK or Dubai. Any donations we get just go directly to the locals we're employing in the developing countries that we're working in. So it's incredible, life-changing work. I mean, our first trip, I kind of feel a bit sorry for my dad. He's, mid-60s. I don't think he quite expected to be backpacking around third world countries in his mid-60s. And, I'm sort of there pushing him along to do this. Our first trip, it was a major success. We went to Kenya, to Nairobi. We had so many different schools to visit. I'll give you one example. One of them was a recovery center. And in this recovery center, they find homeless children in the streets of Nairobi, just north of Nairobi and Thika. And they take them off the streets and they try to transition them into full-time education within 6 months. And these kids are, covered in scars, they're covered in burns and bruises, they're malnutritioned, they're small for their age because they haven't eaten much. Their life's been about survival. They've gone through domestic abuse from the police, substance abuse. These guys are addicted to drugs and alcohol. They're 9 years old. And, we went in there and it was a converted pigsty and there were bunk beds stacked up in this place. A lot of the kids are in there wetting the bed, so no one gets too much sleep. And they get one good meal a day. But you go in and it's got this happy vibe where everyone just feels so grateful and happy to be there because the alternative is pretty grim. And when we came in, I met someone called Neil, and he had been anticipating our arrival. So for 30 days before we came, and this attests to the resourcefulness of the Kenyan people. Before we came in, he had researched the Warrior Academy, studied so many of our YouTube videos. He gave me, with the 30 boys, a Warrior Academy display, and they had already learned half the syllabus for white belt. And so I rocked up and I was there in my uniform and I was just watching this Warrior Academy class go on. And so what we do is we work with these children, we provide them uniforms, we give them that identity, we set them on this black belt journey. In that particular transition center, they train in our system 5 days a week. So we give them an accelerated approach, not once a week, but 5 days a week, so that by the time they leave, we're able to change how they think about themselves and their life. And so that when they do inevitably go back into their old homes, wherever they used to live, or the guardianship they go into, they're not persuaded by negative peer pressure. Instead, they have a different approach to how they make decisions based on the new morals and values we've taught them. And in actual fact, one of the things they've never had in their life is consistency. So we teach them there, but then we employ people in the schools that they go to who also teach them the same martial arts program. So they go from that transition center to the school. And because they've done such an intense course with us, we immediately give them a leadership role in the school. So that keeps them engaged in the school. They then have a higher level of conduct, better concentration because they want to be in school, and they're given this sense of identity and confidence so that they actually teach other students in there. And they basically become Warrior Academy ambassadors. So my big vision with this particular group is that these 30, there are some girls, but they're split. There's more boys there. So those 30 boys, the goal there is, that within 8 years, they are employed instructors with the Warrior Academy. They've gone from the streets of Nairobi. They've gone through the homeless transition center. We've taken them off, drugs and alcohol. We've given them their full health, from malnutrition to full health. They're in full-time education. They've gone through 8 years of our program, and now they're teaching children around the world. That's our vision for a lot of our children out there. Something really magical happens when you give a child like that an identity and a journey and a moonshot, and it doesn't just take them out of their current situation. It takes them out of a life of poverty. It takes them out of, a life of helplessness. And it's it's coming from a place of we're not giving them a hand up. In actual fact, we're making their lives a little bit harder, right? I don't know if you've ever been to a Warrior Academy class, but they're not easy. We actually push our students a lot. But by giving them that opportunity to go through that, we also give them an opportunity to grow into something which they would never think would be possible. You know, when I read about the book, Not a Victim, you know, we remove any of that, and it's just about empowerment. It's about, you know, giving children the tools to take themselves out of difficult situations. And so that's what the Bates Foundation is primarily about, working with young people in devastating conditions to empower them to transform their lives and to see a brighter future. And we do that through the development of character.
Sebastian, I feel like I needed a box of tissues to listen to that. Honestly, I don't know how you like share that without feeling like, or at least the emotion coming out. But I can feel that buzz that you get from it just through what you're describing. And this legacy, I think, is an understatement. I think it's beautiful what you're doing. You always use that phrase, it's a hand up, not a handout. That's one of the other reasons why we're so supportive in what it is you're doing, and one of the reasons why obviously we want to support you with our upcoming event, the Become a Force for Good event at the end of the month, because it is all about helping these children become who it is they want to be as well, right? So yeah, they've got this identity, but it doesn't stop there for them. You're actually giving them a real purpose, and I just think it's so powerful. And so I'm so grateful for what you're doing, and I'm not even on the actual receiving end of it, but it's so inspiring because it does inspire us, and no doubt any other entrepreneurs or any other people listening to this who want to create their own moonshot of what that could look like for their families, for the people in their communities, whether that's across the world or whether that's in their household. I think there's so many lessons and powerful things that you've shared today that will help people kind of move along their way. I wonder, is there anything else that you want to add to this conversation before we wrap it up and we let people know about the upcoming event that you're going to be speaking at?
I think if you're a parent, you'd be listening to this, you're probably quite curious about the 3 C's. I think that if you want to learn or understand deeper, you know, insight into your child's 3 C's, I can give you a link which will help you do that. If you go to breakthrougharea.com, then you'll be able to actually analyze your child's 3 C's and get a personalized PDF report on that, which is really useful. And then if you want to talk to our team about how we can help, you can do that. Otherwise, you can just analyze that, and there's stuff you can implement straight away at home yourself to help develop your child and give them a black belt character. There's the Warrior Academy podcast, which has got lots of useful information. There's, if your child's going through bullying, or you want to feel more prepared to mentor your child through bullying, then you can actually listen to the audiobook Not a Victim, which I've written and recorded, and it's a really useful emergency survival guide for parents. And then there's also the Warrior Method, if you'd like to learn more about character development and learn more about my story. Otherwise, I'd probably say the best thing you can do if listening to this, and you're listening to this before the event, is come along to the event, because I'm going to be diving deep into some of the stories around what I've talked about, to really, you know, give you a powerful insight into my life and character development, which I haven't, a lot of things I haven't shared today, which I will be sharing there, which I hope will be quite inspiring and useful for you.
Nice, beautiful. We'll make sure obviously all the links that you've just mentioned go in the show notes as well. So everybody listening, you just heard Sebastian say he's going to be showing up with even more from his story, and again, so many incredible things that you'll be able to take away as well. So if you want to attend a meaningful event and really figure out how you can drive real change in the world and surround yourself with like-minded people, inspiring people like Sebastian himself and the other incredible speakers, then we will welcome you on the 27th, 28th of October. As Sebastian has already mentioned as well, 50% of the proceeds are going to be going towards the Bates Foundation, and the other 50% towards various other charities as well with our partner B1G1. And the tickets close for that event on the 25th, Tuesday the 25th. So I'll put the link to the tickets into the show notes as well. So we hope you will come and join us. Thank you so much for joining us today for this incredible conversation. My mind is already going in so many different directions of one, how I want us to support you even more and what it is you're doing, but also our own moonshot and our own legacy that we want to leave as well. So thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.